She tore my test in half, right there, in front of the whole panel, red ink bleeding through the word unqualified like it was the only truth that mattered. What she didn't know? I wasn't just another candidate. I was the CEO sent to evaluate her. I'm Claire. And 10 years ago, my sister made sure I didn't get hired. Today, she didn't even recognize me. You ever been underestimated so deeply by your own family that your silence became your biggest comeback? Let me tell you how that interview room turned upside down and why I didn't need revenge to win. Before we jump into the story, if you don't mind, let me know where you're from by leaving a comment below. That way, I can send a special hello your way. Now go ahead, grab yourself a warm cup of water and find a comfy spot. It's time to begin the story. I hadn't walked into Storm Tech in 10 years, but the scent hadn't changed. That mix of lemony glass cleaner and slightly burnt espresso still hung in the air like it had been waiting. The front desk hadn't changed much either. Same glass counter, same potted snake plant that looked half alive. "Ms. Carter?" the receptionist asked without looking up, fingers still dancing over her keyboard. "Yes," I said, adjusting the strap of my beige tote. "Claire Carter. I'm here as a board observer." She handed me a printed badge with a clipped smile and motioned toward the elevator. No small talk, no questions, just routine. As the elevator climbed, I reached into my bag and felt the edge of something stiff and familiar. My old intern badge, the one that read Claire Morgan in fading ink. I didn't pull it out. I just let my fingers rest on it for a second, then let it go. The doors opened with a soft chime, and a young woman in a Storm Tech hoodie greeted me with the kind of overeager smile I remembered wearing myself. "Right this way, Miss Carter. You'll be observing today's innovation candidate panel." The hallway was silent except for the muffled hum of keyboards and the low buzz of lights overhead. Glass walls lined both sides, giving everyone a perfect view of everyone else. I followed her into the conference room where the panel was already assembling. She motioned to an empty chair near the wall, technically in the room, but not quite at the table. I sat quietly, setting my iced oat latte on the small side table next to me. No one turned to greet me. That was fine. Jessica Lynn was the first to arrive with purpose. She wore a maroon blouse, sharp collar, and an expression that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. She nodded at the others but barely glanced my way. She used to smile more, I remembered, or maybe I just imagined that. Mr. Adams entered next, adjusting his tie, his gray hair combed in the same precise pattern I remembered from when I was 22, and pitching redesigns no one read. He was carrying a leather folder and speaking into a Bluetooth headset as if he were in a movie. Then she walked in. Vanessa, my sister. She was dressed in navy. Of course she was. The blouse was silk, the kind that didn't wrinkle, and her heels clicked like punctuation marks. Her hair was pulled into a sleek bun, not a strand out of place. She carried a ceramic mug that probably cost more than my apartment's toaster. She didn't see me, or, more accurately, she looked right past me. She greeted Jessica with a quick kiss on the cheek and slid into the chair at the head of the table. She was speaking before she sat down, asking about the candidate lineup, the new assessment rubric, and whether the assistant had finally fixed the broken espresso machine. I didn't respond. I didn't even breathe too loudly, just watched. The others began shuffling papers and adjusting screens as the first candidate was brought in. Vanessa leaned forward, smiling with that polished warmth she saved for strangers who could be useful. As the interview unfolded, I watched Vanessa make the same small gestures I'd seen her perfect since we were teenagers. The slight nod when someone said what she wanted to hear, the practiced pause to let her disapproval land without words, the subtle way she passed a resume she disliked to someone else without even glancing at it. The candidate, a young man with good posture and an Ivy League pin on his lapel, spoke confidently about scalable ethics frameworks and decentralized trust engines. The panel nodded. Vanessa tapped a note into her tablet and offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't write anything. I didn't need to. Back when I interned here, I remember sitting across from Jessica and Mr. Adams. My presentation slide slightly misaligned, my blazer one size too big. I had pitched an AI compliance model I'd spent 3 months on. They'd nodded politely, asked no follow-ups, and moved on to the next intern before I could even explain the core concept. Later, I found the printed slides in the trash bin under Jessica's desk. My iced latte was sweating slightly on the table beside me. I reached for it as Vanessa leaned over to Jessica and whispered, "Hope this bored observer doesn't slow us down." Jessica chuckled softly, then glanced my way. I met her eyes, gave a brief nod, and took a slow sip of my drink. Vanilla and oat milk. Comfort in a paper cup. The next candidate was called in, and the panel reset their expressions. Vanessa tapped her pen on the desk, the rhythm almost musical. Her voice carried just enough to establish dominance, but not enough to be called rude. "Let's keep this moving," she said. "We have 6 more before lunch." As the next resume was handed out, Jessica turned to me again, her brow slightly furrowed. "Have we met before?" she asked, tilting her head like trying to place a vaguely familiar tune. I smiled, polite, careful not to reveal anything too soon. "Possibly," I said, my voice steady, "but probably not where you'd expect." The second candidate wore a fitted navy blazer and shoes too shiny to trust. He spoke fast, every word rehearsed. Vanessa smiled, but it wasn't the warm kind. It was the kind she used when she was measuring someone, calculating whether they fit into the world she had curated. "Thank you," she said, scribbling something in red on her pad before the door even closed behind him. The first candidate had stammered. Vanessa didn't even blink before circling lack of confidence in red ink. I could see it from where I sat. Her handwriting had only grown sharper over the years. The interviews moved along with mechanical precision. The questions didn't change much. Neither did the way they responded to answers. Every panelist had their pattern. Mr. Adams leaned back when he wasn't impressed. Jessica tilted her head when someone said something too bold. "Vanessa." She smiled when she smelled fear. Across the room, the coffee cart made another slow pass. Everyone got a fresh cup. Everyone but me. Again. I didn't mind the caffeine snub, but I noticed. Of course I noticed. A young woman entered next. She looked about 22. Her resume was clenched in both hands like it might fly away if she let go. Her blazer was too large, her shoes too flat, her eyes too wide. But she stood straight. That mattered. Vanessa glanced at her once and whispered something to Jessica, who chuckled softly. I didn't need to hear the words. I saw the look. I'd worn that look before, on the receiving end. Back in 8th grade, I once wrote in my journal that I wanted to build systems that could feel. Real emotion detection, empathy-based logic paths. Vanessa found it, of course. Read it out loud in front of our lunch table like it was comedy gold. "Claire wants to make robots cry," she'd said between giggles, then added, "Also, she still sleeps with a nightlight." Everyone laughed, including me back then. It was easier than explaining I didn't. Now, watching this girl clutch her resume, I remembered exactly how that moment felt, being too different, too tender in the wrong room. I didn't know her name yet, but I recognized the tremor in her voice. I recognized the way she apologized for taking too long to answer. I also recognized the way Vanessa was writing things down before the girl had finished her second sentence. "She seems," Vanessa began, pausing just long enough for Jessica to fill in the gap. "Unpolished?" Jessica offered. Vanessa smiled like that had been her word all along. "Exactly." I leaned slightly forward. "What would you do," I asked the candidate, "if a system you designed failed in front of an entire client panel?" The room stilled. Mr. Adams glanced at me. Jessica frowned. Vanessa's pen stopped moving. The girl looked surprised to be asked anything directly. She blinked, once, then said, "I'd ask them what mattered most to them and rebuild from that. If they're still talking to me, it means they still care, and I can work with that." Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Mr. Adams tapped his pen against the desk but said nothing. Jessica scribbled something without looking up. The candidate smiled just a little. It wasn't confidence. Not yet, but it was something real. When she left the room, Vanessa looked toward me for the first time that day. "She reminds me of my sister," she muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. "Always thought she could outthink rejection." I didn't react, not with words, but I picked up my pen, opened my notepad, and wrote 6 words, not soft, just quiet. For now. I looked back at the hallway where the young woman had walked out. She still held her resume like a shield, but her shoulders had relaxed, just slightly. That used to be me. Mr. Adams dropped the test on the table like it owed him something. The thud echoed through the glass-paneled room, heavier than the actual weight of the packet. 10 pages printed double-sided. A single black pen sat on top, no calculator in sight. "Let's make it fun," he said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Want to give it a shot too, Miss Carter?" The panel chuckled, a ripple of amusement washing over the room. Jessica glanced at Vanessa, who offered the smallest shrug of approval, as if to say, "Let's see what the board lady's made of." I didn't smile. I didn't hesitate. "Sure," I said, reaching for the pen. Vanessa tilted her head like she was watching a child pick up a violin for the first time. Mr. Adams handed me a test copy, smugly. "No pressure. We won't count it," he added, like that was a kindness. The other candidates looked on with quiet curiosity. Some avoided my gaze. Others exchanged glances. No one said a word. The clock on the wall started ticking louder in my ears as I flipped to the first page. Logic puzzles, systems architecture, API chain mapping. These weren't theoretical questions. These were real, familiar even. I remembered nights in my old apartment when my heat barely worked and the fridge hummed louder than it should, building frameworks like these from scratch. Contracts pieced together from 3 clients at once, notes scribbled in the margins of pizza boxes, half-slept dreams about data trees. Back then, my fingers used to shake from exhaustion. Now they move smoothly across the page. I didn't erase a thing, didn't look up, just answered. 1 page. Next, breathe, write, turn, breathe again. Vanessa's heels clicked once as she crossed her legs. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her watching. When I reached the last question, my wrist was beginning to ache, but I didn't stop, just filled in the final diagram, circled a variable, and put my pen down. I slid the test across the table. Mr. Adams didn't pick it up right away. Vanessa did. She skimmed the first page for no more than 3 seconds. Her smile widened. Too fast, too satisfied. She clicked her pen open. Red ink. I watched her write in clean, cruel block letters across the top. Unqualified. She didn't stop there. Scribbled wrong focus, lacks clarity, poor fit in the margins. None of which were technical flaws, just opinions. Cold, empty ones. She let the pen hover over the last page before making a long, deliberate line through the conclusion. Then, with the grace of someone dropping confetti at a party, she tore the packet in half. Slowly, loudly, the kind of tearing that silences a room. The papers fluttered to the floor between us. One piece landed face up beside my chair. No one laughed, but I heard someone exhale, sharp and awkward. Jessica stared down at her hands. Mr. Adams cleared his throat like maybe he'd gone too far, but no one stopped her, not even when she leaned back, clearly proud of what she'd done. I sat still for a beat, my body calm, my breath steady. Then slowly I bent down. I picked up the top half first, folded across question 5. Then the lower section, creased down the margin. My name was still legible. Claire Carter. But then I saw it. One page had fluttered further, just under the table leg, pinched slightly beneath the rolling wheel of someone's chair. It had landed right next to my old badge. Claire Morgan. The ink on the badge had faded, but not disappeared. The edge of the torn test just touched its corner, like they belonged to the same chapter. I reached for both. That's when Vanessa leaned in, voice low, sharp as ever. "Still crawling, little sis?" she asked. Not loudly, just enough. I didn't look at her. I stood slowly, brushing off my skirt with care, held the folded pieces of the test in one hand, the badge in the other, and I said, not loudly, not bitterly, just evenly, no, just remembering exactly how this feels. I walked back to my seat and sat down again like nothing had happened. No one spoke, but I saw Jessica finally glance over, noticing maybe that I wasn't flustered, that I hadn't crumpled like they expected. I wasn't trying to prove anything, I just wanted to remember, because some moments don't break you. They build the line you refuse to cross again. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood, and for once, the room actually stopped talking. Jessica looked up from her notepad, her pen frozen mid-sentence. Mr. Adams shifted in his chair, mouth slightly open like he was about to interrupt, but didn't. Even the assistant by the door paused, unsure if she should step out or stay. I stepped forward and placed the folded test, the one Vanessa had torn, right in the center of the table. "There's context you all missed," I said evenly. Vanessa rolled her eyes, but her hand tightened around the pen she'd been using all morning, like it was the last tool she could control. The others glanced between her and me, uncertain of which direction to face. "Please don't waste our time," she said, her voice still smooth but thinner now. "Your time's already been wasted," I replied, "just not by me." I turned to the assistant. "Could you cue the recording from this morning's session, please? Interview Group 2, panel audio included." She hesitated, only for a moment, then nodded and walked over to the console under the screen. A few taps, and the screen blinked to life. The panel's voices filled the room, clear, polished, and increasingly uncomfortable. Vanessa's laugh came first, then Jessica's chuckle, then the sharp sound of paper being torn. The footage was grainy, but precise. From the camera near the ceiling, you could see the angle of my hands folded in my lap, the steady way I looked at Vanessa as she wrote "unqualified" in red. It was all there. The silence now was colder than the one I'd walked into this morning. No one moved. No one cleared their throat. Vanessa's face had gone flat like a photo that no longer matched the subject. Then the door opened. Eli walked in, quiet but undeniable. He didn't say a word at first, just stepped beside me, rested a gentle hand on my back, and gave the faintest nod. The kind that says, "I've got you, but you've already got this." Jessica sat straighter. Mr. Adams stood halfway, as if unsure whether to greet him or explain something. "Anything to add?" Eli asked me, his voice low. "Yes," I said. I reached into my bag, pulled out a plastic card, and held it in my palm. "Claire Morgan, International, Class of 2014, I read aloud. I laid the badge on the glass tabletop beside the torn test. "This is who I was when you all last ignored me." No one spoke. I looked directly at Vanessa. Her chin was slightly raised, but her eyes didn't meet mine. Not anymore. "You didn't just fail to see me," I said, my voice clear. "You taught others not to." My fingers released the badge, and it landed softly with a tap against the glass. But in that moment, it sounded louder than any raised voice could have been, like a gavel, like a memory coming home. Vanessa leaned back. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Jessica scribbled something, quick, messy. Mr. Adams opened his mouth, but it was Eli who spoke first. "Would you like to continue, Claire?" he asked. I nodded. "I would." I pointed to the screen. This was a hiring process meant to identify innovation. Instead, it became a mirror for what this company fears most. Change it can't control. Voices it hasn't chosen. Contributions it doesn't credit. Vanessa shifted in her seat as if trying to reset her posture into something stronger. But it was too late. The assistant at the console paused the video. The frame froze on Vanessa's hand, holding the red pen over my resume. The word unqualified, visible at the corner of the screen. No one said a thing. Vanessa finally broke the silence, her voice shaky for the first time. "You planned this." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, hurled like a stone into water already too still. I looked at her, not angry, not smug, just clear. "No," I said. "You just gave me everything I needed." And for the first time in years, I saw it, really saw it. The fear behind her eyes, the recognition that I wasn't her shadow anymore. Vanessa didn't say a word when the HR director slid the folder across the table. Her hands hovered above the surface, unsure whether to touch it or deny it existed. For a moment, I thought she might actually pretend she didn't see it, but her fingers finally landed on the cover, curled just slightly at the edge. Across the table, Eli sat straight-backed, suit jacket buttoned, face unreadable. He'd shifted into procedural mode. Not my partner, not my witness, just the executive representative the room expected. The conference room had changed. More bodies now. Legal counsel, HR, the full board, half of them remote on the screen, the rest seated in person. No more coffee cups, no more jokes. Just printed statements, time-stamped screenshots, quiet tension. "Vanessa," the HR director said, adjusting her glasses. "These notes were appended to Claire's applicant record in 2019. We verified the login credentials. They originated from your account." I didn't move. I didn't smile. I simply nodded once. Vanessa finally opened the folder. I saw the flicker in her expression, the moment she recognized the language. Her own words, her own tone. Displays resistance to feedback. History of unpredictable collaboration. Would not be a cultural fit. Harmless on the surface. But I knew what those words meant in the system. Soft landmines. Phrases that shut doors without leaving fingerprints. She exhaled slowly, lifting her chin. "I was protecting the company," she said, voice low but growing firmer. She had no direction. Still doesn't. "She's sitting right here," Eli said evenly. Vanessa's eyes darted to him, then back to me. "You don't understand what it's like," she snapped, "to have someone clinging to your name, trying to get ahead on your coattails." I could feel the temperature shift in the room, something subtle, a crack forming where her authority used to live. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "I have something," she said, voice tight. An email Claire sent to a client, called them a walking disaster in heels. It's unprofessional, embarrassing. She turned the screen to face the table, as if she'd revealed a smoking gun. I didn't flinch. I reached into my own folder and slid a slim black document across the table. "This is the server log," I said. "From 2 nights ago, the email originated from Vanessa's IP address. It was sent using a temporary admin passcode registered under her name." Silence. The legal advisor leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "We've cross-verified the metadata," he said. "The origin is clear." Jessica's pen stopped moving. She placed it carefully on the table and slid her notepad a few inches away from Vanessa's arm. Not dramatically, just enough. Mr. Adams let out a small laugh, like maybe this was all a bit much. "Come on," he said, aiming for levity. "Maybe this is just a misunderstanding. Family drama getting a little too close to business." No one laughed with him. Vanessa's expression had collapsed into something brittle, like all the angles she'd been leaning on had suddenly flattened. The HR director cleared her throat. "Effective immediately," she said, her tone firm. "Vanessa Morgan is suspended pending a full internal investigation. Access credentials will be revoked within the hour." Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she didn't protest. I looked at her, not with triumph, but clarity. "No applause necessary," I said softly, "just accountability." And that was it. She stood slowly, gathered her things. For the first time all day, she didn't look at me like I was beneath her. She didn't look at me at all. As she walked past, the light from the window caught the edge of her watch face, and for a second it looked like it might blind her. But it didn't. She kept walking. The door clicked shut behind her. Eli leaned forward. "With Vanessa's removal from the strategic team," he said, "we'll need immediate leadership reallocation." One of the board members, an older woman with a kind face but very sharp eyes, spoke next. "Claire," she said, "we'd like you to accept full strategic authority moving forward. The corner office is ready." I looked toward the far side of the room. The corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany desk, skyline view. It was the throne Vanessa had spent years defending. "Thanks," I said, voice steady, "but I'd rather be closer to where the code gets written." Jessica looked up. For the first time, she smiled, not politely, but genuinely, like something had shifted, like something was finally real. The sky outside my window was caught between identities, too dark to be morning, too light to be night, that blue hour where everything softens, where even the city slows down just enough to breathe. I wrapped both hands around my cafe latte and watched the steam rise. The new office wasn't glamorous, mid-floor, no skyline view, but the walls were real, and the hum of the engineering floor below felt like home. Just outside my door, I could hear soft jazz playing from someone's portable speaker, the clack of keys, the occasional laugh muffled by a desk partition. It wasn't silence, but it was peace. On my desk, a small corkboard stood half-filled. I reached into my drawer and took out the folded test, torn once, now carefully taped together. The red ink had faded slightly, but the word unqualified was still legible. I smoothed the corners and pinned it to the board. Right next to it, I added my old badge, Claire Morgan, International, class of 2014. They looked like scars, honest ones, and that felt right. My phone buzzed. I didn't rush to check it, but eventually I reached over. It was a message from my father. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you before." I stared at the screen for a while, not out of anger, not even out of hurt, just clarity. I set the phone down without typing anything. Some bridges aren't meant to be crossed twice. A gentle knock pulled my attention back. The door eased open, and there she was, the young woman from the interview. Her hair was neater today, her shoulders straighter, but the nerves were still there, just quieter. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. I nodded and motioned for her to sit. She perched on the edge of the chair, eyes darting briefly to the corkboard. I saw the moment she noticed the word unqualified. Her brow furrowed for a second, then smoothed out. I slid a folder across the desk. "This framework built our foundation," I said. "It's yours to improve." She blinked, then nodded once, almost like she didn't trust her voice yet. We didn't exchange big words. There were no speeches, just understanding. As she stood to leave, she hesitated. You didn't have to choose me." "I didn't," I replied. "You chose to show up. That's harder." She smiled, a real one this time, and left with the folder tucked under her arm like armor turned purpose. Outside my window, the sky had brightened slightly, somewhere between blue and gold now. A new group of interns walked past the hallway, chatter, coffee cups, hopeful shoes. One of them, a boy in an oversized sweater, glanced through the glass. He caught my eye. I nodded. He nodded back, uncertain but curious, maybe even inspired. I turned back to my desk. The taped test fluttered slightly in the air-conditioned breeze, not loud, not flashy, but permanent. The paper still fluttered slightly on my corkboard, quiet and steady, like it had nothing left to prove. In that silence, I finally understood. I hadn't needed anyone to lift me up. I had just needed space to stand on my own. Sometimes, the people who doubt you the loudest are the ones afraid of their own reflection. But grace, real grace, is choosing not to shrink or shout, only to outlast. In this life, it's not about winning the room. It's about walking through it with your dignity intact. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you've walked a similar road. Maybe you're still walking it. Either way, you're not alone.